It's an absolute delight to be back here again today with Mark Jeffrey. Mark, I think this is your third time on the channel. And I ran into Mark because of his work on the YouTube channel, The Last Theory, which we'll talk about just briefly. But since launching The Last Theory, Mark has also launched a new idea of his called the Open Web Mind. And I want to hear about that as well. And and in addition to that, you have something called Things Made Thinkable, which sounds super interesting. And maybe you can just give us a high level description of what that's all about. And you've written several books. Sounds like you keep very busy. And then you also do artwork. You have some carvings that sound really beautiful. So, and I also want to say big congratulations on your interview with Jonathan Gorard. I noticed that he recently said that that's the best conversation he's had with anybody. And so he puts that out there as the one where people can find out about his work. So kudos to you. That's
Yeah,
really
that was a
exciting.
great conversation. Jonathan is a crazy
Yeah.
guy to talk to. He's got a lot to say. He's quite brilliant. So thank
Well,
you.
and what you did was so wise in breaking it up into small chunks because when he talks, it's like drinking from a fire hose. So breaking it up into
Yeah.
pieces was really smart. Okay, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you started the last theory, which I'll let you give the definition of the last theory and why you started it, and then maybe talk to us about Open Web Mind.
Yeah, that's great. So I studied physics at university a very long time ago and kind of lost interest in it after university. I went into more computational fields and I did a little bit of physics and science, but mostly I was working with computers, and I didn't really see physics going anywhere for like a couple of decades. It seemed like it was getting bogged down into mathematical details of string theory and getting more and more and more detailed, and there were no big ideas. I then came across the framework, I guess you would call it, put out there by Stephen Wolfram, based on hypergraphs, based on kind of nodes and edges connected together, an extremely simple idea that amazingly creates enormous complexity, and complexity that Jonathan Goddard, who you mentioned, has kind of tied to physics and shown that the complexity that arises from the hypergraph can actually conform to general relativity, give us Einstein's equations, and conform to certain aspects of quantum mechanics as well. And more than that, give us great insights about why general relativity is the way it is and why quantum mechanics is the way it is. And I'd just never seen anything like that in my lifetime in terms of progress in physics. And it's too early to say whether a last theory of physics will come out of this framework, but it's enormously promising. And the mathematical and the philosophical ideas that come out of it are interesting in their own right, even if it turns out to be not quite applicable to physics. This framework is extraordinarily interesting. So I thought, wow, this is crazy. I wish I knew more physics and mathematics so I could actually contribute to this. What I do know, though, is writing, and I do have a passion for sharing complex ideas in simple ways. So I thought, okay, well, that's my role then. I'll try and make this new framework from Stephen Wolfram and Jonathan Goddard more accessible, like you say, break things down into tiny chunks so that they're more digestible, and put some graphics there so that they're more understandable. And so that's how I launched the Last Theory YouTube channel.
And your graphics are just brilliant. I mean, the way you've done it is so simple and beautiful, and it really does make it accessible for everybody. So, yeah, it's really great. So, recently, the last time you were on here, you talked quite a bit about the open web mind and what you were hoping to do with it, and but you hadn't launched it yet. And recently, you launched it, and tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, so launch would be an exaggeration, I think. It's not available for people to use yet. I did at the beginning of 2024 launch the Open Web Mind YouTube channel, which is, I hope, kind of explaining a little bit more, again, in bite-sized chunks about what this is going to be. And I'm working furiously. I've got some parts of Open Web Mind working. Obviously, since this is a project that hopes to encompass all human knowledge, that's kind of rather a large task. So I'm slowly working on getting knowledge into the hypergraph and getting it to a state where other people can use it and create their own minds and get their own knowledge into the hypergraph. And once that starts happening and different people's minds can start linking up, then I think it's going to be truly powerful. So yeah, I'm slowly working towards kind of a more open launch where people can actually go and look at it themselves.
So there are several options out there of kind of organizational pattern making websites and apps where it allows you to go in and kind of maybe do a mapping of your ideas and then organize and save them in particular places and link ideas to each other. And is it that kind of thing or is it different than that?
It encompasses that kind of thing, and it's larger than that kind of thing. So these systems, I think there's like a large number of people that get an enormous amount out of those kind of note-taking systems, like Voting, for example, is a good example of one of them, or even kind of simpler systems like Notion, where it doesn't have quite the same hypergraph structure that Rome has, but nonetheless, people uh, create notes effectively and can publish them, keep them private or publish them as they like. And I think that's created an enormous amount of value for people. Where I think it has shortcomings is in being able to connect up different people's ideas. So you have your own Rome and you can connect all of your different ideas together, but you can't connect that to everybody else's ideas. There's no kind of, basic vocabulary of nodes of the knowledge hypergraph that you can connect together. And so you can't take advantage of other people's knowledge in a particularly fluent way. Of course, you can publish stuff, other people can read that stuff. But one of the things I'm sort of reacting against with Open Web Mind is the fact that all of these notes and all of the web is kind of written in the English language or the French language or Japanese or whatever language you talk. It's in a human language. And that's great. I mean, that's great for communication of ideas. Humans have obviously used language for communication of ideas for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years. But I think we can do more with the web. What we've done is we've taken the old technology of writing that we used to use with books, so we've just put it up on the screen, and that's great. That's an enormous step forward. But I think there's another step forward beyond that, where instead of translating our thoughts into language and putting that on the web, somebody reads it from top to bottom in a very linear way and then translates that language back into thoughts, back into the original ideas that you were trying to communicate. What I'm hoping to do is skip those middle steps there, the translation from thoughts into language and language back into thoughts. What if we communicated our ideas in more of the same way that we hold our ideas in our brains? In other words, in terms of a basic knowledge hypergraph of connections between ideas that very much map onto the structure of the brain, which is obviously connections between neurons. So yeah, I'm hoping to go beyond Rome and those other note-taking apps, not only in terms of allowing people to meld their minds together and take advantage of each other's knowledge, but also in terms of trying to minimize that translation to and from language in order to communicate ideas.
Wow, that's kind of mind blowing. I mean, how does that happen practically? Well, I can't ask you too much because then you'd be giving away your IP.
Oh no, there's no IP. I called it Open Web Mind for a reason. It's completely open. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about any of how this happened. So yeah.
Well, I mean, aside from the potential of a mind meld, a hand coming out of the computer and doing a mind meld with me, how do I get my thoughts from my thoughts to your thoughts without the in between?
Yeah, so because the web is basically in human language, the English language or whichever other language already, that's one way to get ideas into Open Web Mind. Maybe I can like share a screen here and
Oh,
it'll
sure.
give me easier way to explain kind of how this works visually.
Sure, let me set that up for you. There you go.
Okay, let me let's start with like I set up a just a little mind that kind of would be my own mind. I've put very little in there so far, but just as a place to start, let's try that. Okay,
I'm
just
not
get
seeing
back
your
to the
screen
window.
yet.
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm working through
That's okay.
the controls
I
here.
just wanted to
Yeah.
keep you updated. Yeah.
Okay, I've got the share screen option, but none of my screens are appearing here.
Huh. I don't know
Um,
why that would be.
Let me just try clicking on one of them and see if that works. Ah, okay.
Yeah, they keep changing the format and they keep
Yeah,
changing the toolbar. They
that's
change
right.
where the tools show up. And so about every 3 months, I have to re-educate myself on how to use something.
That's right. I think this is an operating system upgrade that meant that there's new permissions that I need to give. If I
Um,
Oh, click the lock to make changes. It's okay. I'm getting
yeah.
there. It's just a little bit of a process here. Okay, I've got it enabled. Okay, so it's telling me that it will not be able to record the contents of my screen until it's quit. So I'm going to have to quit Zoom and reopen the meeting. So I'll
Okay,
drop off for a
I'll put us on
moment.
pause for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can see your screen, but it's dark.
Yep, that's great. So
Okay.
so yeah, let me start here. So what I've got here is Uh, just a mind I've set up. You can see the minds listed on the right here. There's a whole bunch of open web mind core minds, which contain kind of, some fairly fundamental nodes in the knowledge hypergraph. And then at the top, there's my own personal mind. Like I say, I only put a few links and connections in there just to demonstrate it. But now I can search in all those minds for myself. And so it brings up the node for me, and then a whole bunch of nodes that are connected to me. So you can see I've not completely eliminated language here as we were talking about, but so the nodes are labeled with language and also labeled with images, and so that you can see a little bit more visually what you're looking at. And what I did was just in this bind, I just set up nodes to some of the places I've lived, like Canada, and to a couple of my books, and to some of the people that I've interacted with, like Stephen Wolfram and Jonathan Goard. And then some of my projects like The Last Theory and Goodwood Globes, the wood carving that you mentioned, and Open Web Bind. And then there's another link here to person, just because Mark Jeffery is a person. There's a hyperedge in the knowledge hypergraph between me and the whole concept of a person, which gives a little bit more detail than some of these other links. These other links, I just put associations here, but you can define in a hypergraph more detail about what the relationship is between Mark and Canada, for example. So I've just made it an associative link between Mark and Canada, but I could have defined that Mark lives in Canada. Um, I have defined that with this hyperedge between Mark Jeffery and person. This is what I call an instance class hyperedge. It's Mark Jeffery is an instance of the class person, which is a very long way of saying Mark Jeffery is a person. So it just gives you some idea of how visually this might look with a bunch of links between a bunch of different nodes in particular minds.
Okay. And then so you have along your set of minds over on the right, you had institutions and countries, I think. So if you opened up one of those, like organizations, what would a person find inside there?
Right.
Is it
So
just a list of organizations or is it a searchable space?
It's a searchable space. So I don't have many organizations in there. I hooked up that Mind just because Open Web Mind is an organization. So it has the information about the name of that organization and the image that goes with that organization in that Mind. But there
Okay.
is another Mind that I do have some other information in. If I click on Canada, for example, this is
Mhm.
in the countries Mind. So if we go back to the list of Mind, there's an Open Web Mind countries Mind, which simply has details of the countries of the world, both kind of their names and their images, but also connections between them based on, at the moment, just how close they are. So if I click on Canada there, it brings up this concept of a country. Again, this is an instance class link here. Canada is a country. It's an instance of the class country. But it also brings up some of the other countries in the Open Web My Countries Mind that are close to Canada. So Greenland is kind of just across the water. Obviously, United States is just to the south. And then I can follow these links as well. If I go to United States, then I can get to Mexico. I can actually just navigate my way all the way around the world. I'm going down to South America now just by following these links based purely on proximity between these countries. And yeah, eventually I will end up, if I carry on going south, in Antarctica here. So,
Ah, that gives me a much better idea of what's happening there. Yeah.
and you can see with all these lines on the screen, the lines
Mhm.
are representing the edges between the nodes, and they're different colors based on different activations. Like I clicked on a whole bunch of different nodes there, and so I created a whole bunch of different activations. And so, yeah, what you're looking at now is what you would think of as a graph, or underlying it is, in fact, a hypergraph with all of these different edges between these different nodes.
So then if I were using this app eventually, I would know what the different colors of nodes mean in terms of
Yeah,
the
so
red nodes have a different meaning than the green nodes, or is it they're just using different nodes because you're bouncing off of different countries there?
yeah, so the colors will become the colors don't have any particular significance. The fact that the edge to Mark Jeffrey is yellow doesn't have any particular significance. But perhaps if I share a different mind here, I'll just stop this share and jump to a different screen. Um, It'll make it a little bit clearer what these colors actually mean. So actually, let's start with the chemistry mind here. So let me share this screen. So you can see in this mind, I've simply got a single mind, or in this view of a mind, this is what I call the thinker. It's a way of thinking. You can connect any number of different minds to your thinker. This is another one of the Open Web Mind core minds, which is chemistry. And currently, what I have in there is just the chemical elements. Eventually, there'll be chemical molecules and all sorts of other information in there as well. But at the moment, it's just the elements. So this makes for a very simple mind. If I search for hydrogen, start at the beginning, then again, there's a whole bunch of different connections between hydrogen the elements. And because I've just confined this thinker to just the chemistry mind, all you're getting here is chemical elements. Obviously, there are links between hydrogen and all sorts of other things in the world other than chemical elements, but at the moment we're just confining ourselves to chemical elements. So with the country flags, there was no color background to them here, but in this case, there's a blue background to hydrogen. And if we click on a different atom, like a different chemical element like sodium, then that activation is effectively a different activation. I've said, yeah, I'm interested in sodium as well as hydrogen. So all of the links from hydrogen remain colored blue, and all of the links from sodium, including the nodes, the edges, and the nodes that sodium is connected to, are all colored green. So it gives you some idea of, for example, helium. Helium is colored blue and it's got a blue link to hydrogen. That suggests that it's more closely related to hydrogen than it is to sodium. And aluminum here is colored green and it's got a green link to sodium. And so that suggests that it's more closely connected to sodium. But then there are other atoms, other chemical elements like nitrogen, for example, which are colored gray. They're actually linked to both the sodium and hydrogen. And there's no real kind of choosing between them. It's not like the link to sodium is considerably stronger than the link to hydrogen or vice versa. You've got approximately the same strength of link between the two of them based on all sorts of things. Proximity in the periodic table is one of the main ones. Kind of there's all sorts of different properties of chemical elements that I've put into determining, okay, how close is nitrogen to hydrogen and how close is nitrogen to sodium. So that's what the colors do. If I click on nitrogen, then I'll activate nitrogen and it'll be a different color, in this case, red. And now you can start to see how the colors kind of contribute to kind of a little bit of understanding of what's connected to what. And clearly it can get very complex very quickly as it does here.
So then if I were working with this, could I ask specific questions like how nitrogen is connected to sodium or to hydrogen? Or
Yes, you
do I
could.
just have
And
to kind of intuit it based on the way the connections come up?
yeah, that's a great question. So I don't have that to show you right now, but yes, you can ask how is nitrogen connected to sodium? So going back to the Mark Jeffery is a person, you'll be able to click on Mark Jeffery or person or the edge between those two nodes and get a description of that edge. And the description of that edge could either be highly technical, where it says Mark Jeffery is an instance of the class person, or it could just be in regular English language. Yeah, Mark Jeffery is a person. And so, yeah, for each of these connections, they might be merely associative, in which case it'll just say, yeah, Mark Jeffery is somehow associated with the concept of a person. But as more and more kind of detailed knowledge gets into the open mind, it'll be able to break it down into, yeah, why are these two things connected? And not just in a single way. There might be multiple reasons why nitrogen is connected to sodium, for example.
It seems like an overwhelming task to upload all the information that would be necessary in something like this. I mean, there's so
Yeah,
much knowledge in the world.
that's right. So that's where it comes down to, okay, so how is it possible to get all of human knowledge into effectively this hypergraph structure? And there's many ways to think about this. So one way of thinking about it is if you launched Wikipedia and you said, yeah, this is going to be an encyclopedia with, many times more knowledge in it than the full volume set of Encyclopedia Britannica, it's just going to be way, way bigger than that. If I told you that kind of back before Wikipedia was founded, it would seem impossible. And even if I told you, well, I don't know, we're going to have lots of different individual contributors and they're going to contribute their knowledge for free. And if there's anything wrong, they're going to go in and fix it. It just seems crazy that that kind of thing would be possible. And yet it's possible. Wikipedia exists. It does have all of those contributors who are willing to put their knowledge into the encyclopedia project. Another way of thinking about it is if we had to connect each node with each other node individually, or even if we had to kind of determine what are the nodes individually, that absolutely would be an impossible task. But there's many sources of data out there that we can use as a jumping off point. So one source of data that I've used is the Princeton University WordNet, which is effectively a list of all the words in the English language with definitions, but broken down by meaning rather than just by words. So, many words in the English language have many different meanings, and WordNet breaks those meanings down. So, let me see if I can bring something up here that'll demonstrate what WordNet does. Uh, um, just need to specify here exactly what I'm looking for. Uh, okay, that's great. So let me share my screen again. Okay, so this is actually going through Open Web Mind as a way into WordNet here. So you can see I just typed this URL in, specifying which minds I want to search in. So every mind has a code which allows me to type it into a URL. Obviously, if you're looking in the thinker, then you can just search for minds. But in this case, I'm just using the code for the entity's mind. And this is the mind that I've created from WordNet. And I've asked, okay, what are all the nodes that I created from WordNet that are related to reality? And so you can see here that it actually has kind of four different meanings of the word reality. There's like the state of being actual or real. There's kind of all of your experiences of the world. There's the quality possessed by something that's real, the state of the world as it really is, like reality as opposed to illusion. So they're all kind of slightly different meanings of the word reality. But it's very important that Open Web Mind, because it represent knowledge and not language, that it doesn't just take a single word reality and make that into a node, because there's many different meanings of the word reality, and different languages have different words that would give rise to different nodes if you were just using the words. So instead, there's a node for each of these different, slightly different meanings. And so this makes Open Web Mind, first of all, it can be multilingual. The nodes represent ideas, not words, but ideas. And so those ideas can then be translated back into another language. You know, if you're looking at Open Web Mind in German, then I can create a link between, you know, the idea of the world, reality in that sense, and the meaning code, for example. As a YouTube channel, you're interested in the idea of reality in that sense. So I can create that link between reality and the meaning code YouTube channel. And then somebody looking at Open Web Mind in German would be able to see both the icon that represents reality and the German word that represents that node, and see that link, regardless of the fact that that link was entered by somebody who speaks English. So this is very different from Wikipedia, for example. Wikipedia, there's an English language Wikipedia, and there's a German language Wikipedia, and there's Japanese and Arabic and so on. But if I write an article in English, it appears only in the English language Wikipedia. It doesn't then suddenly get translated into the German language one. And so everything is siloed by language. And so part of the idea here of creating nodes based on ideas rather than words means that it's no longer siloed between languages. Any links, any knowledge in any language automatically translates into another language or into no language if you're able to understand what all of the images and the icons mean. So this is one source that I've used to create nodes. Another source is the WordNet database. Basically has kind of, you know, the words of the English language, the ideas in the English language, and a few concepts that are so common in the English language that even though they're not words, things like Albert Einstein, for example, you know, everybody knows who Albert Einstein is. So Einstein is sort of a word, and so they include Albert Einstein in WordNet, even though it's a name of a human being rather than a word. But Wikipedia goes way beyond that. Wikipedia has an article on Albert Einstein and a whole bunch of other physicists and other people, artists, everybody that aren't in WordNet. So this is another source. The mere titles of Wikipedia articles, the fact that there's a Wikipedia article about something suggests that there is a concept in the world that needs to be represented in Open Web Mind. So again, I can take the Wikipedia database and I can create nodes for Uh, Probably not initially all of the articles in Wikipedia, because that's an awful lot of articles, but certainly the ones that get linked to. And so I can create nodes from that. So that's the nodes. There's many ways to create nodes without going through one by one and creating them. You can absorb large amounts of data. So then it comes down to, well, how do you get these edges in place? How do you know what's connected to what else? And so again, let me share my screen here, because it's always better to have a visual example of this than just to have me talk about it. Um, okay, let me share this one. Okay, so
I can't help
uh,
but notice that that thing down in the lower right-hand corner, which I suppose represents the two hemispheres of the brain, looks a lot like a coffee bean. I never noticed that before.
oh,
Coffee beans
okay.
do look a lot like the brain, don't they?
And walnuts as well. If you put all the curves in, then they look a lot like walnuts too. So I don't know if that's the final version of the icon, but yeah, that's the idea there. That's supposed to be a brain.
Yeah.
So what I've got, actually, I've got a whole bunch of minds in here. I've got a mind representing the meaning code, and mind representing Mark Jeffrey. But let's uh, uh, let's start with, actually, why not go here first? We'll come on to the meaning code. Okay, so this is one for the last theory. So let me, since I got the last theory mind up here, we'll come on to the meaning code mind next. But let's start here. Search for the last theory YouTube channel. Okay, so this is an example of how um, you can take information. I didn't put this all together node by node and edge by edge. What I did was I pointed my reader code to the Last Theory YouTube channel. So the Last Theory YouTube channel has obviously got like a whole bunch of videos on it. It's got a whole bunch of words on it describing those videos. And some of those words are repeated more often than others. So just by having pointing my code at that website, not looking at it manually, but getting code to have a look at that website, it can say, okay, well, what's the last theory about? Well, I don't know. There's all sorts of videos. It's about this video here. What precisely is causal invariance? And it's about causality. I mentioned causality quite a lot, and it's about general relativity. I mentioned general relativity quite a lot. Mark Jeffrey is the it got this from my own personal mind, not from the YouTube page, because I'm not sure my name appears very prominently on the YouTube page. But from my personal mind, it knows that Mark Jeffrey is the person who started the last theory. The names Jonathan Goddard and Stephen Wolfram come up a lot. The concept of the universe and space and the fourth dimension and quantum mechanics and theories, all of these things come up a lot. The hypergraph, of course, comes up a lot. So merely by pointing code at a website, the code can start to get some kind of idea about, okay, what are the connections between the last theory and the rest of the world? I'll pause there because I've spoken for a very long time there about how
Oh
I
no,
get
I mean
nodes and
I'm
edges into
fascinated.
open
That's
mind.
really cool. So the you didn't program in these connections. These connections just came up when you pointed it at the channel.
That's right. And I did some tweaking and I did some searching for images, for example. So
Mhm.
um, the the code just looking at the YouTube page would not have come up with the images for Jonathan and Stephen, because there are no images of them that are recognizable as such on the YouTube page. So
Mhm.
I manually uploaded those and I
But what
did some
about the
tweaking.
thumbnail images? Did it come up with the thumbnail images for you?
That's right. So one of the minds that I have connected here is the Open Web Mind YouTube mind. And this is kind of, again, this is another way of getting very large amounts of data into the knowledge hypergraph very quickly. So the YouTube mind is what I think of as a pass-through mind. There's actually no data in the YouTube mind at the moment. no data at all. But what the YouTube Mine can do is it can take a YouTube video ID and it can tell you, okay, well, I know where the thumbnail for that YouTube video ID is. It's stored in a very predictable location on YouTube. So merely by pointing the this video, for example, knowing that there's a connection between the Last Theory YouTube channel and this video, and knowing the format of YouTube video IDs, this kind of shell of a mind effectively says, okay, give me that ID and I'll give you the image that represents that node. And so there's a bunch of different shortcuts like that that can be taken, particularly with very large repositories of data like YouTube, where without my ever uploading or knowing even what the thumbnail for this video is, I can link to the Open Web Mind YouTube Mind and it'll automatically return that image for me.
One of the things that came up for me when you were talking about this too is, I guess this would be my own pet thing I would love to see somebody do, because I didn't really pay attention to philosophy when I was in college, but I have since gotten a fairly deep interest in philosophy and how um, ideas proliferate or pathologize or colonize from one person to another, or to another group of people.
Yeah,
There's the Stanford website that has all the philosophers on it with a kind of a capsule of their ideas.
yeah,
And it always seemed to me that it would be so great if somebody could take all of that and put it into some kind of a like a web mind that would show which
yeah,
philosophers were related to which ones and what grew from that, and and follow it all back, but then also follow it all forward, as Stephen Wolfram often says, tree it out and see
yeah,
what the fruit is of certain ideas.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's like some of the origins of Open Web Mind for me. It's an idea I've been thinking about for decades now. But you mentioned things made thinkable. I really like visual representations, and the kind of thing that you say there gets me very excited. And that's exactly the kind of thing I would want to make a things made thinkable visualization of. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Which philosophers are connected to which other philosophers, and then which ideas are connected to which philosophers, and then backwards and forwards between the two. How can you kind of navigate philosophy? How can you think about philosophy in an interesting way? And I kept on making kind of different visualizations that were trying to get at this idea. And I thought this is a common problem. It's like, and there's a common solution to it. And this is the common solution for me is open web mind. So absolutely, I would really like to get the reader to the point where I can just point it at the Stanford website that has all of the, I often refer to it as well, so it has all of those details of all of the philosophers. And by doing the same thing that I've done here with the Last Theory YouTube channel, it will do that for each of the pages on each of the philosophers and feed it into Open Web Mind, link up to that mind in your thinker, and you have exactly that. I don't need to create the visualization. All I need to do is point the reader to that website, and then I immediately have a visualization of philosophers and philosophy.
It's really such a complex problem because I'm sure you've seen the image of a tree and then the ground and then the roots that go down below the tree.
Yeah,
And we don't often think that the branches and the roots grow contemporaneously, right? You plant the seed in the ground, the roots start to grow down, and the branches start to grow up.
yeah,
So at the end, you have this image. They're almost mirror images, but it's happening at the same time. The roots are going down, the branches are going up. There are many ways that that plays out, but let's take a philosopher. You have to think about a philosopher in terms of looking at all those roots that went down, try to flip it over and say those roots going down are the tree branches of all the philosophers that influenced this one person. So this
yeah,
whole upside down tree are all the influences that poured into this one person here. And then the tree are all the people that he has influenced since. So
Yes.
you have you have a fractal structure that's also a chiastic structure, like an X. This whole boatload of stuff goes into this funnel into Mark Jeffrey. And then what built Mark Jeffrey? All these ideas. Now, from Mark Jeffrey is going to come Open Web Mind and the Last Theory and all these things, and all the people that are influenced by his ideas. And that's true of every person. So you could take every philosopher and they would all have a tree structure like that. But then at the same time, you also have the way that all those philosophers interact with each other,
Yep.
even on a contemporaneous scale, not the history that came from behind, but they're all sitting around together at some cafe and talking about ideas, right? And then each of
Yep.
them goes off in his own little silo and builds a tree. So yeah, it's a very complex problem.
Yeah, there's lots of things that you've just prompted thoughts in me there. Is one is that kind of what you're talking about there is not just edges, but hyper edges. An edge just says, yeah, this philosopher is connected with this philosopher, but a hyper edge can encode the information. It's like, did this philosopher influence this philosopher, or the other way around? Did this philosopher influence this philosopher? So once you have that kind of hyper edge information instead of just the edge information, just the association, you can then start to build visualizations that will capture that, saying, okay, these philosophers influence these philosophers in a particular direction. Another way that you can do that is not just through the hyper edges, but through timelines as well. You know, you can obviously each philosopher has a date of birth and or date of death, and so
Mhm.
there's like a period in which they were most prominent. So you can then when you're visualizing the associations between philosophers, you can spread it out along a timeline. And there's many, many different ways. Every node has many, many different properties, many, many different numbers associated with it, such as, you know, dates of birth and dates of death. So Open Web Mind will be able to kind of separate those out so that you've got visualizations that aren't just associative, but convey more information, numerical
Okay.
information, directional information.
Uh-huh.
I wonder if I could, it's a long time since I've had a look at this, so I hope it still works, but there's an Open Web My visualization that I have on things made thinkable. So let me bring that up just to demonstrate this using not just associations, but kind of numerical information in this case. Okay, there we go. So there's this visualization of planets. Okay, so these are the planets. And now I have to remember how this particular interface works, because like I say, it's a very long time since I've had a look at this one. So right now, the planets are arranged by on a graph, effectively, a good old-fashioned XY graph, where the x-axis is the distance from the sun. So Mercury is closest to the sun, Jupiter somewhere in the middle, Neptune is furthest from the sun, and obviously it's not to scale because the distances are vast. On the y-axis, we have mass. So Mercury is a very light planet, and Jupiter is a very heavy planet. So you get the different masses there. So these are all nodes in this particular offshoot of Open Web Mind that I created a little while ago. But the nodes, as well as having the images and the names, they have these properties like mass and distance. And so what that allows you to do is to lay it out, not just in this particular way, but there's a whole bunch of different possible numbers associated with the planets that we could then plot. So we could plot instead of distance from the sun, we could plot density, for example. And so this is now a plot of density against mass. So it gives you some insights here that the inner planets here are the more dense planets, and Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune are the lighter planets. I didn't actually know that Saturn was the least dense planet. Yeah, I would have guessed maybe Jupiter, but yeah, obviously I was wrong about that. And then we can change all sorts of different axes, including the z-axis or the size axis. So at the moment, I've sized the planets based on their diameter, but I could size them based on their escape velocity, for example, very closely linked to their diameter, so not much changed there. Or I could size them based on their orbital velocity. Now that's very different because Mercury has a very high orbital velocity, so now it's shown much larger. Saturn has a much lower orbital velocity, so even though it's a much bigger planet, I'm now showing it smaller. So obviously, this is just one example, but relating this to your philosophers and philosophy example, you could size the images of the philosophers based on how important those philosophers are. If you've got some measure of, how influential a philosopher has been, maybe the number of different links. I mean, maybe every philosopher in history has been influenced by Aristotle, and so Aristotle will appear very large because Aristotle, the node for Aristotle, has a very large number of links to other philosophers. But then on the x-axis, say, you could plot the lifetime of the philosopher so that you show Aristotle kind of, very long time ago on the left side of the graph, and more contemporary philosophers on the very right-hand side of the graph. And you could use controls like these to decide what kind of visualization you want of philosophers. And when OpenWebMind starts to get very intelligent, it'll start to think, okay, well, these are the kind of visualizations other people have created of philosophers in the past, or this is the information I have about philosophers, or I know all of their dates of birth and I know how important all they all are. So it could give you suggestions like, how about you plot kind of their importance and their influences of who influenced who against time to create a timeline of philosophers.
So then if I had if I had open web mind, would I be able to add to the categories that are, so I even without any programming ability, I could add functionality to that page.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, let me
That's what it
show a
means,
different screen here.
open web.
Exactly. I tried to capture in the title what it is. I always like names that reflect very much what the thing is. Um, okay, so is this the right window? I have, as ever, many windows open. Yeah, so this is the one with the meaning code on there. So I did this for you, but suppose I hadn't done this for you. Maybe you wanted a mind that represented the meaning code YouTube channel. What you could do is you could go to the YouTube page in your browser for your channel, and I could do something like create an Open WebMind plugin where you just say, okay, all the information on this page, I just want you to add it to my mind. And it would read the content of that page, take a look at the images, take a look at the words that are repeated more often than other words, and unusual words that don't normally appear in the English language but appear a lot on your YouTube page. And it could create a mind for you. So here's the one that I created for you. Again, it's just kind of, a very basic thing. The reader's not fully working yet, but you see how this would work for you. I did some manual tweaking here. I added this
Mhm.
photo of Jordan Peterson, for example. I added some symbols for meaning and truth and reality and beauty, for example. But eventually, as I add more and more of these images for the basic nodes, you wouldn't need to add them yourself. If I go to another website and that has the concept of beauty on it, there's already an image for beauty in OpenWebMind now, so that would be additive. So this would be your mind, and you can add anything to your mind. You might be kind of interested in Wolfram physics, and so you might go to the Wolfram physics website and say, well, take a look at this, add this information to my mind. Or I might have already set up a Wolfram physics mind that has all the information that I've already taken off the wolframphysics.org website. And so you could just link to that mind. You could add that mind to your list of minds that you want to include when you're thinking through Open Web Mind. So yeah, the idea is that everybody has their own mind, maybe multiple minds. You might have a mind for the meaning code with all of the work that you're doing in the meaning code, all of the connections related to that. But you also might have your own personal mind. You might make the meaning code mind public so other people can link to it, and you might make your personal mind private because there's information in there that you don't want everybody to be able to see. But you have control, and you would probably link to your own mind, to the meaning code mind, and then to a whole bunch of minds that are not yours, but you're just very interested in.
Wow, that's really cool. I can see how useful that would be. In fact, it seems like it would be useful just for YouTube to have something like this on every channel so that if people want to know whether they want to listen to the channel or not, they could just
That
check
would be
out
cool.
an association like that, and get an idea of what the channel is actually all about.
One of the things I always think about when I think about like having all these multiple minds and being able to kind of create the connections between them is like, suppose I had a whole bunch of things that I'm interested in, the channels that I subscribe to on YouTube, the podcasts that are in my podcast player, my own personal website that's got links to The Last Theory and to Open Web Mind and to a bunch of my other projects and Harticle and so on. Wouldn't it be cool? I don't have enough information in here yet, but let me share again this one, which I have both the meaning code and the last theory and my own personal mind in here. So and then a bunch of these core open web minds. Wouldn't it be cool if I have like all of my interests? And then I can search for things like, I don't know, the last theory. Let's start there. And then I can search for the meaning code too. So what's happening here is we're now seeing, as we did with the chemistry mind, for example, we're now seeing both nodes that are activated through my searching for the last theory and nodes that are activated through my searching for the meaning code. But crucially, there are some nodes that are linked to both the meaning code and the last theory. Stephen Wolfram, for example, is one of them. Physics is another one. Physics is one of the words that comes up on your YouTube page that the reader thought, oh, okay, this is part of what the meaning code is about. And there are others as well. Theory is a good one. Both the Last Theory YouTube channel and the Meaning Code YouTube channel talk a lot about theory. And so that's interesting. And so the nodes that are large now are obviously the Last Theory and the Meaning Code, because those are the ones I activated, but also the ones that are common to both of them. So theory is much larger than it was either when I just had the Meaning Code or the Last Theory activated. Stephen Wolfram is larger than it was when I had just the Meaning Code or the last theory activated. So it's kind of combining these two minds. So what I imagine is once I've got all of my minds representing all of my interests and a whole bunch of connections, I could then just search for, okay, well, just filter this down by podcasts. And I could see a whole bunch of podcasts that are linked to not just directly from the meaning code and the last theory and me and maybe some of my friends who have made their mind available for me to meld with, and a whole bunch of other people who I follow. Maybe Jordan Peterson has a podcast, or it has featured on a whole bunch of podcasts. And so there's links between Jordan Peterson and all of those different podcasts. I could say, okay, well, expand this hypergraph outward, follow links further, and filter it by podcasts. And then I'd be able to see a whole bunch of podcasts that I might be really interested in because they just combine a whole lot of my different interests based on what I link to from my own personal mind and what other minds I've melded with.
Mhm.
I really want this because I find it really hard to find good podcasts and YouTube channels to subscribe to.
Well, the algorithm is pretty useful because, I mean, when the first time that you
Yes,
were on my channel, you were just starting out. You just had a few
yeah,
followers and you had just begun the project, and yet YouTube fed you up to me. So that,
yeah.
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, their AIs are pretty clever at finding these connections.
Yeah,
It's interesting. I love thinking about AI and the similarities and differences between AI and Open Web Mind. Kind of one of the similarities is effectively this hypergraph. The big difference is that the hypergraph is visible and open and navigable in Open Web Mind, whereas it's hidden inside the AI in YouTube. And even the Google engineers don't really know what's going on inside that algorithm. There's like a whole bunch of connections. It's a neural net, and they can like trace them, and they can get some idea of what's going on. But really, it's a bit of a black box to them. So yes, they're both hypergraphs, and I think OpenWebMind will have some of those powerful aspects that the YouTube algorithm has. It finds connections that you think, oh, well, that's an amazing thing, but I never would have found this person, this channel, whatever it is,
yeah.
without the YouTube algorithm
Wow.
surfacing it. So I'm hoping that OpenWebMind will have those advantages, but without the disadvantages that Google owns the YouTube algorithm.
Mhm.
Nobody can see inside it, not even the Google engineers. And you can't explore it. It comes up with an answer. AI, if you go to ChatGPT and you type something in, it comes up with an answer. And you can always dig deeper and say, well, how did you get to that answer? And so on. But it's always language and you're following it. And it's like it gives you the answer. Whereas what I'm hoping from Open Web Mind is that it'll be more of an exploration where you're working towards finding the answer and you can find out how you found the answer when something pops up as a podcast that you might be interested in. You can trace the links. Okay, well, what are the links there? How did you come up with this particular podcast? And you'll be able to follow the links and say, oh, okay, it's because of my interest in Stephen Wolfram and Jordan Peterson and the meaning code, and they combine through these very particular edges to lead me to that node representing that podcast. So, yeah, I hope it'll be a more open and a more the same thing, but with more agency, where you can learn rather than just be given the answer.
Yeah, I mean that's the dual, or I suppose the word open has many meanings in your open web mind, but that's certainly one the dual meaning of it. The open web mind meaning it's going to be open source. People are going to be able to use it and add information into it.
Yeah,
But open also meaning it's more open, it's more implicit information that we can explore, that we can almost poetically find your way through all these nodes and edges rather than having it cut and dried. Here's the information, swallow it. And, so yeah. So, and I want to thank you so much for your time today. I know we had some little technical hiccups, but I think it was well worth the conversation. And
yeah.
I want to let you have plenty of time to be working on Open Web Mind so that we can all benefit from it in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, if any of your viewers are interested in The Last Theory or Open Web Mind, you can find them both on YouTube, or it's lasttheory.com and openwebmind.com, where you can subscribe to my newsletters and get the latest on what's happening. Or just take a look here, and I'm sure, Karen, you'll be keeping everybody up to date as to what's
Yes,
happening.
I'll put all that in the description section of the video as well. And tell us what's the temperature in the Yukon right now?
It's actually suddenly got warmer. It was we had some minus 35 days earlier last week, and it's now gone up to around zero. So it feels
And you
absolutely
call that warmer?
crazy warm. You go
Oh, is
outside
that
and it feels
zero?
tropical.
That's zero Fahrenheit or zero centigrade?
Sorry, it's 0 centigrade yet.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so it's not as bad as 0 Fahrenheit for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, well, very good. Well, take care of yourself and stay healthy, and we'll talk again soon.
fantastic. Thanks
Okay,
so much. I really appreciate the conversation.
bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.